head and neck cancer. I'm going to quickly remove this academic cases. So, it is evidence from the medical policy plan. It is the general surgery from Apollo Hospitals, Hyderabad, and later on went to do surgical oncology here from Yashoda Hospitals, Hyderabad. He has got a special interest in head and neck oncology, and he is with us to discuss on treatment for surgery in head and neck cancers. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. It's a privilege and an honor to speak on this forum. The reason being one of my teachers, Sampath sir is here, and Nagaraj sir. Both of them were my teachers, and they both were a reason why I was interested in surgery. So first time when I got PG, I had got ENT actually. Then I don't know if you remember, I spoke to him. నీ ఇష్టము ముక్కులో నోరులో వేలు పెట్టాలని ఉంటే తీసుకో. That is what he said. If you are interested in putting your fingers in the nose and mouth, you take. Then I thought no, and I repeated and I did general surgery. Now I realize every third I do a PR. So the topic which is given to me is principles of surgery in head and neck cancers. And as Dr. Ali was saying, there are so many subsides. I don't know about what should I speak. So I decided to speak on two subsides. One subside which I see very commonly and another which you see commonly, oral cavity and larynx. So when we come to principles of head and neck, the point about surgery is if you are able to give a good margin in head and neck, then the chance of recurrence comes down by 50 to 80%. You need not worry about spinal cord, you need not worry about mandibular necrosis, you need not worry about xerostomia. It's a one-shot treatment. So if you're able to do a good job in surgery, then you can reduce the recurrence rates by 50 to 60%. Okay? And for surgery, most of the surgeries in head and neck do not end only in resection, they end up in reconstruction as well. So reconstruction and rehabilitation itself is a very big topic. I will not touch on it today. I will discuss only resection. And we talk of resection, we should talk of resection of the primary, resection of the nodes. So oral cavity, the most important thing is we need to have a negative margin. Now, how do we make sure that we get a negative margin? First thing, when we are operating, grossly see that you get 1 to 1.5 centimeters of margin, what you see with your own eye. If you are doubtful, send this margin for what is called as a frozen section. When you send it for frozen section, within half an hour you will get a call saying your margin is positive or your margin is negative. The final pathology report should say that you are at least 5 millimeters away from the tumor. If you are less than 5 mm away from the tumor, that comes under a high risk tumor, and the patient will not only receive an adjuvant radiation, he will receive an adjuvant chemo radiation. Okay, and it also means that we as surgeons have not done a good job. Okay. Now, when we talk of margins, especially in oral cavity, one of the important things that we need to know is assessing the mandibular involvement. Now, suppose if you look at this image, the tumor is somewhere here, the mandible is here, there is a periosteum in between. The tumor will not infiltrate the periosteum and involve the mandible. What happens is it crawls over the gingiva just like a lizard crawls over the wall, and through the dental socket it enters and invades into the mandible. It infiltrates the inferior alveolar nerve and it travels along the inferior alveolar nerve. Are we getting this? So if the distance between the tumor and the mandible is less than 5 mm, that means we need to do some sort of a mandibular resection. What sort of mandibular resection? That we'll understand in the next slides. So this is one more image. This is an image of a tooth mandible and this is an edentulous mandible. If you can see the inferior alveolar nerve, it is much deeper when compared to this mandible. What happens is that as the age increases, the mandible starts receding and the inferior alveolar nerve starts becoming more and more superficial. So, if you have a tumor which is in close proximity to the mandible, the chance that the inferior alveolar nerve is involved is more in a patient who does not have this tooth. Are you getting this? Edentulous mandibles are more commonly involved when compared to dentulous mandibles. Now this is the mandible. Suppose there is a tumor which is in this area. It is around 3 to 4 mm away from the mandible. Now to take the margin, you will have to take the mandible, but you will not take the entire mandible. What we can do is we can just take a curve like this and we can take a rim of this upper part of the mandible. So that is called as the marginal mandibulectomy. I'm sure you know about all this. Suppose there is a big tumor which is there in the mandible. You cannot take a rim mandibulectomy. You have to take a cut here. You have to take a cut here, and that is called as a segmental mandibulectomy. Now, how to make sure that the mandible is involved or not involved? So, clinically, there are a few features. One, the patient will say he is recently losing his teeth. There is a recent onset of loosening of teeth. Second, there will be loss of sensations over the mentum. Loss of sensations over mentum says there is involvement of the inferior alveolar nerve. Third, we need to palpate the mandible with our index finger and the thumb. Any expansion of the mandible suggests that there is involvement of the mandible. And fourth is the radiology, the CT scan and the orthopentomography. So these are the various types of mandibulectomy, marginal, segmental, hemi. These are the various types of marginal mandibulectomy. This is for an anterior, this is a lateral, this is a posterior marginal mandibulectomy. A few more things about marginal mandibulectomy. After doing a marginal, this height what remains has to be minimum of 1 centimeter. If it is less than 1 centimeter, there is a chance that it will fracture. Most of these patients go for radiation. After radiation, there is a higher chance of osteoradionecrosis. So basically, this height of the mandible should be more than 1 centimeter. The second thing is these cuts should not be acute like this. It should be like a saucer-shaped cut. This is an example of a tongue lesion which is going onto the floor of mouth, and we have to do a marginal mandibulectomy for this. So this is the difference between the marginal mandibulectomy and the segmental mandibulectomy. Suppose there is a gross invasion of the mandible by the cancer. There is invasion of inferior alveolar nerve. There is massive soft tissue disease adjacent to the mandible. The tumor is arising from the mandible, or the tumor that has metastasized to mandible. Then we do not do a marginal mandibulectomy. What we need to do is a segmental mandibulectomy. Now, suppose there is a tumor in the ramus, near the ramus of the mandible, which corresponds to the retromolar trigone of our oral cavity. In such a case, then we do not preserve the entire mandible. We do what is called as a hemimandibulectomy, wherein a part of the mandible along with the ramus is removed. Now, whether to preserve the condylar process or not is a big discussion. It depends on the reconstruction which you want to do. Suppose we are planning for a bony reconstruction, then it is better that we preserve the coronoid process. If you are planning to do a reconstruction only with muscle, then there is no point in preserving this. We remove the condylar process. So this is a CT image which shows frank erosion of the mandible. And in such a mandible, would you like to do a marginal mandibulectomy? There is no point. Segmental mandibulectomy can be done. There is no need to do a hemimandibulectomy because we get good margin for the bone. Apart from the mandible, the other third dimensional margin that we need to worry about is the margin near the base of the skull. Okay. So this is the lateral pterygoid plate, this is the medial pterygoid plate. You might be knowing this.
Workshop with faculty for the 11th of the platform. This difficult entity and other faculties are it's a workshop, not a present topic.
Thank you very much, sir. Sorry, sir.
So this is the third margin that I was talking about. As you can see in this is a tumor which is almost extending up in the foramen ovale. So there is no way they are going to get a margin in this patient. And this is the patient that Dr. Ali was talking about. That this is the patient who is going to go for an upfront radiation. And after we have sterilized the fail, if we feel that we may get a margin, then we are going to operate on this patient. So this much about the primary. Then coming to neck, most of the head and neck cancers need addressal to the neck, and it will depend upon the primary. As we are discussing oral cavity, we all know that oral cavity uh, level 1, and 2. So, most of the oral cavity cancers, if we have no node which is clinically palpable or no node which can be seen on any radiological imaging, we consider it as a N0 neck, and that standard treatment for N0 neck is a selective neck dissection. So, what do we select depends again on the primary side. Suppose it's a tongue, then we involve level 4. Suppose it's not a tongue, then it's 1, 2, 3 levels. If there is a palpable node, or you are suspecting that there will be a clinically palpable node, there will be a positive node, then we do what is called as a comprehensive neck dissection, wherein all levels 1 to 5 are removed. And I'm sure that you might be knowing this classification. There is type 1, which is a one structure, type 2, we preserve 2, type 3, we preserve all the 3. So larynx has been taken away from us by the radiation oncologist after 2 landmark papers. One was a veteran study and the other one was a archaeology study. Before that, every patient of larynx would get a left, right, center laryngectomy done. Then I think in 1865, the first preservation procedure was performed, and there were 23 patients who underwent this, and all the 23 died because all the 23 aspirated. And that was when the interest in preservation of larynx came down, and then these 2 papers came, and they said surgeons don't have much to do. It's we, the radiation oncologists, who will take care of larynx. And then I think your fraternity rose to the occasion and said that we can do a transoral laryngeal surgeries. To be honest, I have only seen videos of transoral laryngeal surgeries. I have not done any, and I don't know how to do it also. But still, for completion's sake, I'll mention a few of them. So I am just focusing on glottic cancers, not on the supraglottic cancers. So basically, if it's a carcinoma in situ, we can either do a transoral excision or radiation. Now, if it is a carcinoma in situ, then what is the role for radiation? When we take a biopsy, we are not sure that we are taking the representative specimen. There is a chance that it may be an invasive cancer, and hence radiation is an option even in patients with carcinoma in situ. When we talk about tumor which is T1 or T2, there are 3 options. All the 3 are oncologically correct. That means if you irradiate, whether you do a transoral surgery or you do a partial laryngectomy, you are going to get equal results. The recurrence rates for a T1 lesion is less than 7%, irrespective of them. Whereas the recurrence rate for a T2 lesion are almost 80%, only 20%. So you can say, I will irradiate, I will give a transoral excision, I can do a partial laryngectomy. All 3 options are correct for a T1 or a T2 tumor. But as surgeon, I would prefer to do a surgery. Okay. The whole discussion is about T3 tumors. T4, there is no doubt. The cartilage is involved. We are going to do only total laryngectomy. The patient is going to have a stoma for the rest of his life. There is no doubt about T4A tumors. However, few people give chemotherapy in the form of TPS regimen. They try to downstage the disease, and they try to do salvage. They try to do organ preserving laryngectomy. But these patients, almost 50 to 60% of them end up in total laryngectomy again. Okay, so for T4 there is no doubt at all. T3 is the tumor which has created a lot of discussion, whether we should do induction chemoradiation and then operate, or whether we should do a total laryngectomy directly. This is a tumor where whatever you say is correct. So I have just included a few slides about larynx preservation. So what is the goal? It is not just preserving the anatomical larynx. The goal is to preserve the function. The patient should be able to speak. The patient should be able to swallow without aspirating, and the airway should not get compromised. So I am sure you all know this. The first principle of organ preservation is you should have a local control. There is no point in preserving the larynx and leaving the cancer along with the larynx. Then to do that, we need accurate assessment. With the laryngoscopy, you can use CT scan, MRI, all these techniques can be used to do the three-dimensional extent of the tumor. We all know that cricoarytenoid unit is the basic functional unit of a larynx. So preserve both the cricoarytenoids if possible, at least one. If you are not able to preserve even one, send it for radiation or do a total laryngectomy. Resection of the normal tissue to achieve, I'll speak about this. So coming to transoral surgery, basically, suppose there is a mobile cord, there is a lesion which is confined only to the cord is moving well, it is not involving the commissure, it is not extending behind to the arytenoid, it is not involving much of the subglottis, it is not involving much of the supraglottis. This is the best tumor to be handled transorally. Okay, so let's go back to the procedure. That is what it says. You should be able to completely visualize the tumor. The opposite side vocal cord, if there is less than 3 mm extension, still we can do a transoral microsurgery. It should not go posterior to arytenoid. There should not be any subglottic extension. There should not be any supraglottic extension. So basically, the choice between a vertical partial laryngectomy, a horizontal laryngectomy, or a transoral surgery, if we can just remember this one image, which you see often, we can write most of the indications and most of the contraindications. For example, for a vertical partial laryngectomy, suppose there is a tumor which is involving the anterior commissure, or a tumor which is involving the opposite side of the cord less than 1/3 of the opposite cord, then it is extremely easy to do this, the vertical partial laryngectomy. Now, the same tumor, if the thyroid cartilage is involved, will you do a partial laryngectomy? No. Suppose the same tumor, if it is involving the arytenoid, will you do a partial laryngectomy? We can still do, but not vertical. We can do a horizontal because the opposite side arytenoid is healthy. Okay. So basically, we have to remember the larynx, what is anterior to the larynx, what is posterior to the larynx, what is above the larynx, and what is below the larynx. If we can remember this, then most of the indications we can remember very easily. So this is a sagittal view wherein if there is a subglottic extension less than 5 mm, only then we can do a vertical laryngectomy. More than 5 mm extension, then vertical laryngectomy is not a good idea. So this is one of our patients. I don't have as many images as Dr. Ali has. Probably this is the only partial laryngectomy that I have seen. So I take pride in showing you this image. This is a post-RT patient, and this lesion was actually initially and it was going up to the arytenoid. So this is a residual lesion after the patient has received chemoradiation. So for this residual lesion, we decided to go ahead with a partial laryngectomy. So we did a vertical laryngectomy for this patient, and the patient is doing fine. So what all structures are removed? One side of the larynx, everything is removed. It's as simple as that. You remove the true vocal cord, you remove the false vocal cord. What is remaining in between is ventricle. So ventricle also goes. So this is subtype of a vertical laryngectomy. Suppose there is a tumor which is confined only to the anterior commissure. What we can do is we can take a cuff of the thyroid cartilage and we can do what is called as the anterior partial laryngectomy. So these are the cuts for the anterior partial laryngectomy. This lamina of the thyroid and this lamina of the thyroid are sutured together. So just to keep it in place, a silastic keel is placed, a silastic implant is placed, and this implant can be later on withdrawn. So, as I said, if you remember the contents of the larynx, it is very easy to remember the indications and contraindications. Suppose there is an invasion of the cartilage, we are not going to do a partial laryngectomy. Suppose it has gone beyond the larynx, it is going into the thyroid, it is going into the strap muscles, it is infiltrating into the esophagus, it is going into the trachea. We are not going to preserve the larynx. Suppose there is intra-arytenoid or a cricoarytenoid joint involvement, there is no vertical laryngectomy, still there is a chance of doing a horizontal laryngectomy. Suppose both the arytenoid cartilages are involved, there is no point in doing a preservation. So basically, as I said, if you remember the anatomy of larynx, structures above, below, anterior and posterior, you write all the structures for contraindication. If they are not involved, they are the indications. So suppose this is if one of the cords is involved. What if the opposite cord is also involved? Both the cords are mobile, opposite cord is also involved, and you cannot get away with a transoral excision. Then this is the savior, horizontal laryngectomy. So as we know, the whole glottis is removed. The supraglottic part is sutured to the subglottis. These are the structures which are removed. Okay. So as I said, if you remember the structures, you can remember the contraindications also. If both the arytenoids are involved, you are not going to do the same story continues. Cartilage is involved, thyroid is involved, strap muscles are involved. Above, if the base of tongue is involved, if the hyoid bone is involved, there is no question of preserving the larynx. So this is one image, and the other image which you see on ideal, these two images, if you can imprint in a head, then indications of transoral excision, indications of partial laryngectomy, indications of total laryngectomy becomes more easy. So this is one image which I have taken from a book. It has undergone horizontal partial laryngectomy. The supraglottic part and the subglottic part have been sutured together after the excision. So basically, after everything ends, there is a saying that if allopathy fails, homeopathy, if homeopathy fails, then Tirupati. Like that, if everything fails, then total laryngectomy. If your radiation has failed, total laryngectomy. If your partial larynx conservation has failed, total laryngectomy. So ultimately, total laryngectomy nowadays is performed if there is cartilage invasion or if any other treatments have failed, then this acts as a salvage procedure. So it's very, very important to have negative margins. For negative margins, for the most of the places in head and neck is 5 mm. The only place where we can get away with 1 to 2 mm margin is the glottis. Rest everywhere we need to have at least a 5 mm of margin. If we are doubtful about the margin, send the margin for a frozen section. And in larynx, more than preservation of the organ, preservation of the function is important. And hence, maintaining the nerve supply, the supralaryngeal nerves, recurrent laryngeal nerve supply, not damaging these nerve supplies during the larynx preservation is also very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwin. May I request postgraduates if they have any questions related to the surgical principles in head and